pressure.
As long as there have been cameras, there have been news stories that shocked the world. What's up, you guys? It's Whispering Jack, and today we're counting down the top 10 tragedies that shook the world. Number 10. The assassination of Martin Luther King. Through the 60s, the civil rights movement was on a rapid journey to changing the face of America for the good of its own people. One of its most prominent voices was clergyman Martin Luther King Jr., a man with a voice to captivate audiences and enrage the White House for their Jim Crow laws and constant segregation of African Americans. However, in 1968, on April 4th, Mr. King was shot dead at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was rushed to hospital immediately following the shooting and was pronounced dead at 7 a.m. The man held responsible was a fugitive by the name of James Earl Ray, who was arrested at Heathrow Airport in London and escorted back to the United States under indictment of federal law. King's family later told the media that they believed it was an attempt by the government to silence the movement, however they sought it done. Civil rights went on to fight the legal battles, winning the rights and liberties, hoping in the event of a proclamation. Number 9. The murder of James Bulger. In 1993, in the town of Merseyside, Liverpool, 2-year-old James Bulger was found dead on the tracks of a nearby ravine. He was beaten, sexually interfered with, sodomized with batteries, and covered in paint. The investigation led to the haunting CCTV image of James being lured away from the Strand shopping centre by 2 unknown boys. Later, it was confirmed that the 2 boys were Robert Thompson and John Venables. The boy denied all allegations in taped interviews, later released to the public. But after many hours of interrogation, they both admitted to brutally murdering James Bulger. They were charged and prosecuted, receiving detention until the age of adulthood, and then given new identities. What sets this case apart from many others is that Venables and Thompson were only 10 years old. However, many in the public believed the boys' sentence was too little. They received video games, day trips to football matches, and holidays supervised by their group home detention leaders. Since their release, Venables has been arrested on possession of child pornography, and Thompson is rumoured to be living in Australia. Number 8. The Titanic. On April 14, 1912, the RMS Titanic on its maiden voyage was struck by an iceberg in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It sunk hours after being struck and took 1,500 people with her. After its sinking, a royal commission of the UK and a national inquiry by the States was investigated in the tragedy. Witnesses were interviewed, and the fault of the Titanic fell into no man's land. No proper cause was found to determine the question of why the Titanic had ignored telegraphed messages regarding icebergs in the area, as the captain and crewmen perished with her to the bottom of the sea. Since her plunder to the bottom of the blue, there have been movies, comics, and even games released on the mystery that is the Titanic. It is noted as one of the first maritime tragedies printed in early years of newspaper circulation. Number 7. The Columbine Massacre. On April 20th, 1999, in Littleton, Colorado, 2 students, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, opened fire on Columbine High School campus. They killed 13 people as a result of the slaughter, and from the ashes of the school, their bodies too were found among the dead. It was thought that the reasoning behind the shootings was because Dylan and Eric were victims of bullying, but this claim has never held up, considering Eric and Dylan were liked amongst their peers, according to survivors. The idea that victims of bullying are capable of punishing all for their actions of some seems far-fetched. Others blamed music, films, and even Stephen King. Yes, Stephen King. In 1987, under the pen name Richard Bachman, Stephen King wrote the novella Rage about a teen who shoots up his school. In the end, his classmates sent him love letters giving him the notoriety he wanted. It's rumoured that a copy of the Bachman books, a collection of Stephen King novellas, was found in a locker of one of the Columbine shooters. Whether this is true is unfounded. However, King has pulled the story from print and has felt he didn't want to give teens carte blanche to massacre their fellow peers.
All of your books are still in print except one, correct?
Yeah.
And that's Rage.
That book is Rage, yeah.
And that's not in print. Why?
Well, it's not in print because it was a novel about a kid who goes to school one day and shoots his algebra teacher and holds his class hostage with a gun. And he's got this whole backstory about his abusive father and a lot of teenage angst and a lot of problems. And when I wrote it, I started it when I was in high school and I finished it when I was in college. And I published it under the Bachman pen name, and it didn't garner a lot of attention. It was certainly never a bestseller, but it was found in the effects of several different kids. Well, I won't say several, but two at least kids who were involved with school shootings. One of them, thank God, nobody was hurt or killed. The kid just surrendered. But with the other one, there were deaths and there were injuries, and that was enough for me.
Number 6, the 2011 Queensland floods. In 2011, in Queensland, Australia, the greater region of Brisbane, Townsville and Rockhampton were flooded by historical rainfall which overfilled the local dams and flooded thousands of homes and killed few. I want to take a minute to sit on this topic as it happened in my home country. This tragedy struck us hard, and it was really all over the news for days. Families and loved ones alike were kept out of the loop, and local official telephone lines were engaged by constant callers ringing in panic. It rained for almost a week in my hometown, and just lucky that I lived on a peninsula. The flood was very minute where I was. However, the weather was horrific. Local shopping centre car parks were flooded, creeping up the escalators. Local schools were shut down and evacuated to local leisure centres. It really was something that shook our home state, and something that we try to remember every year it comes around. It was important, and it still is important, holding relevance 7 years on. Number 5, the death of Robin Williams. August 11, 2014. Robin Williams committed suicide after a long battle with depression. It was rumoured that Williams had been living with depression since the late 70s, and his acting career was the perfect mask. In such roles as 1 Hour Photo and Mrs. Doubtfire, the depressed and enraged characters of Williams was jokingly admitted by him to be somewhat true of his state of mind. However, as the public enjoyed his comedy for almost 40 years, we failed to see the true pain hidden in the eyes of a man who made himself feel better by making others laugh. Robin's death was a tragedy that not only shook Hollywood, but the world around. Number 4, the Sydney Lint Cafe terror attack. In 2014, a 2-day siege from December 15 to December 16, an at the time unknown man held the Sydney Lint Cafe under siege hostage, with threats of blowing up the entire metro block. The lone wolf, man Monis, was said to be in league with ISIS and fighting on their behalf. His plan was to talk to Tony Abbott, the Prime Minister at the time. He said if he could not speak to the PM, he would start shooting hostages one by one. The siege lasted until 4 a.m. the next morning when the Australian Federal Police bum-rushed and opened fire on Monis in the cafe. In the crossfire were 2 victims who were shot dead by Monis. It is considered Australia's longest played-out terrorist attack and hostage crisis. The terrorist was publicly known for being a rogue cleric and preacher of enforcing Sharia law in Australia and declaring a fatwa on its government. He was also previously charged for murdering his girlfriend and setting fire to her still conscious body. Number 3, the AIDS epidemic. In 1983, the media began concern over a new disease introduced to the United States, HIV. It was seen as a new form of blood cancer that spread by sexual contact and blood-to-blood contamination. In 1985, new campaigns were raised in concern of the disease that resulted in the infection known as AIDS. It was viewed as an exclusively homosexual disease that was on its way to sending America into panic. Along with it, the gay community and its coming-up reputation would be tarnished for another 10 years before the Health Association would breathe light onto the epidemic. The president at the time, Ronald Reagan, refused to even mention the disease in any speech or media appearance. It was a sore point in his campaign against the candidate Mondale. AIDS caused hysteria which led to children diagnosed with AIDS banned from public schools. Those such as Ryan White were among the many victims affected by public lynchings of AIDS victims. Ryan White died peacefully in his sleep in 1990 and was held in high regard by many celebrities as Michael Jackson, Elton John, Donald Trump, and Elizabeth Taylor. Number 2. The death of David Bowie. David Bowie died in 2016 after a long-hauled fight with cancer. It came as a shock as he kept it private from the public and from his fans as to not upset them. David Bowie was known for his flamboyant caricatures and countless number one hits such as Changes, Let's Dance, China Girl, Ziggy Stardust, and of course, Starman. David Bowie died with his family by his side. Bowie would go on to release his last album only weeks prior, which climbed to the top of the charts almost immediately. The Thin White Duke will live on in our memories forever. Number 1. 9/11. On September 11, 2001, 2 passenger jet planes crashed into the World Trade Center, engulfing it in flames and killing passengers on board along with those working on the floors it struck. Only 40 minutes later, the South Tower collapsed at 9:59 a.m. and only half an hour after followed the North Tower. It was reported the terrorist attack was planned and implemented by Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. The attack killed more than 3,000 people and would scar the nation, leaving half a nation to believe the attack to be a false flag by the government as an initiative to invade Iraq and seek their oil. Do you have a tragedy that you think should be on the list? Let us know down below. Like, comment, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys later.